Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome back to another one of my videos. I am Blitz, and today I'm going to be talking about the Jagdpanzer E100. Now, in my last video I did post, I asked you guys to direct message me in Discord and let me know any tanks you struggle in, you want reviews, and anything other like that. And believe it or not, the most, submissions I had sent from you guys in direct message and just overall chat was the Jagdpanzer E100, and I started to think about it, and it actually is a pretty tricky tank to run. It's very large, it's not very well armored on the sides or the rear. Its gun arc isn't amazing, however it was buffed, but it's a pretty tricky tank to run just because it's so large. Some maps you might want to camp, the other ones you might want to push in like a heavy tank, so it really does have some tough things, and as well you really have to know the angle of your tank, where to push it. And it actually took me quite some time to learn how to play it as well. But hopefully in this video I should be able to teach a lot of you guys how to run the tank better if you do currently own it, and maybe get some of you as well to go down this line because it is actually a pretty good line all round. And real quick before I do start talking about the Jagdpanzer, I just want to thank all of you guys for the love and dedication you have put into this channel. We have grown over 750 subscribers just in this month, and I'm currently sitting at 4,960. There is no way I thought we were going to grow this quickly over the next couple months. So I really do want to thank all of you guys for the love and support you have given this channel. And if you haven't subscribed already, do consider doing so. I'm not going to force you, of course. But if you do like my channel and you like what you see, please do consider subscribing because it does help me out. And I really want to break that 5,000 mark. But other than that, guys, I just want to say thank you and I'll get straight back into the video. Now, the Jagdpanzer E100 carries a colossal cannon dealing up to 1,000 hit points of damage in a single shot. And in my opinion, it is the best tier 10 gun you can get on any tank. And you might argue that the FE2 5B183's gun is better because it does more damage, it's got the Hesh. However, due to the recent nerf on that tank, or it's not even recent, but due to that huge nerf they put on the vehicle, and then they ended up buffing the Jagdpanzer, in my opinion, the Jagdpanzer is now the #1 big gun in the battlefield. Not only does this Jagdpanzer have that colossal damage, its gun handling statistics are actually very, very good. It has 314 standard penetration with its AP ammo. And by the way, I am going to be talking about this with calibrated on. I would not ever suggest to run this tank with gun rammer, and if you're running it with gun rammer, I would highly suggest you take it off, because having that extra penetration can make or break certain games for you. When you weren't able to pen that AP shell and you had to load that heat, and you could have one-shot a tank, but instead you brought him down to, let's say, 160, 200 hit points, when you could have just completely killed them right off the game, it can completely change certain battles. Or when you even ricochet shells, and they wouldn't have ricocheted. And the main reason I really suggest it in this tank is not only because its AP ammo goes up quite a bit, is because also it has this amazing heat, which goes up 38 millimeters of penetration, which is normally at 380. It goes up to 418 mil of pen, making it the most effective tier 10 heat pen in the entire game. In fact, the penetration is so good you can literally penetrate the upper plate of a side-scraping mouse with the heat ammo. So it is completely ridiculous, and there's not really any tank in the game I can think you will struggle to penetrate with that heat ammunition. However, that does not mean that you're going to pen every shell if you do load it. A lot of people still that I meet don't know what heat does when it hits spaced armor, and it really, really quickly dissipates in it. And that's why if you shoot heat ammo when you're running a 62A, and let's say you're shooting at like an E100's tracks or something, and you're wondering, why are my shells just disappearing? I should have enough penetration to go through. Well, the reason is because heat dissipates in the tracks. Heat, believe it or not, is actually a chemical reaction that occurs when it hits anything. So it's like a little detonation that creates a super hot, almost explosion when it hits the tank. And when it hits spaced armor, it occurs on the part of the armor that it hits, and it loses a crazy amount of penetration as it travels through that spaced armor. So that is why heat loses quite a bit of penetration when it does hit spaced armor, and that's why heat doesn't lose any penetration over distance, is because, as I said, it only starts reacting once it does hit the target it is intended to. So that's one little fact that if a lot of you guys don't know about it, that is something really cool about heat ammo. But as I said, don't get fooled by it. Don't shoot heat when you're running a Jagdpanzer, even if you do have 418 pen. Don't shoot it at the tracks of a mouse. It's not going to penetrate. There's no point. So that is one thing I do want to get out of there. Just because you have the most pen doesn't mean you're going to pen everything. And by the way, if that heat pen isn't enough for you, just load the high explosive. It has 94 millimeters of penetration, which pretty much means that if you get the side of any medium tank in the game, you're going to be taking 1200 damage on average off of them. And not to mention, if you get a max roll that's up to 1500 damage, you can almost one-shot some tier 9 tank destroyers with that amount of damage. So it is a really nasty round, and in fact it only does about 100 less damage than a 183's Hess shell. So to be honest, you can be just as effective as a 183 and be a lot more aggressive in this tank, and that's why I really like the playstyle of it. And if you notice, when I pulled around that corner and shot that Progetto, I hit him with a high explosive. That's why I didn't even bother to aim. I know that my HE has such a high splash damage that even if it doesn't penetrate the target, you're still easily going to be able to take 400, 500 off of some lightly armored vehicles. If you were to shoot, let's say, a side-scraping E100 with a high explosive from this tank, I can say easily you'll be taking 300 to 400 off that tank. So HE is also very useful if, let's say there's somebody that is side-scraping, like an IS-7, and you just can't get any shots off because nobody's pulling out. Just shoot an HE even next to them. You don't even need to have a sight on an enemy tank when you run a vehicle like this. I literally can shoot the dirt next to a tank that is side-scraping on a wall and still take 150, 200 damage off of their tank, and they don't even know where the shell came from. So that is one really cool trick. And when I start to take a look at the other gun handling statistics as well, they are just as good. The shell velocity is 925, which is actually really quick for just how large the caliber on this gun is. And not to mention, this tank actually has quite a good rate of fire. It has 3,000 average damage per minute when you do run calibrated, so you're still able to pretty effectively fight off any heavy tanks you do come against. And because this tank literally is in the name based off of the E100 chassis, that means that you can pretty much push this tank like a heavy. It's got very good armor, and when you pull up against a tank, let's say like an E100, you can actually out-reload it. That's how good your gun's damage per minute really is. Aiming time is only 2.44, and the dispersion is 0.317, which is really good as well for just a large 170mm caliber cannon. However, there is one really big thing that I want to say about this tank, and this could be why a lot of you struggle in it. And that's because if you take a look at dispersion factors when moving and rotating the gun on this tank, it's 0.230 on both, which are very poor values. So when you turn this tank, the issue is that the gun really blooms. And one thing I've really noticed with the Jagdpanzer especially is that if you don't wait for that aiming circle to go in really small, that dispersion is going to go wherever it wants to go on its own. I've noticed that unless you really wait until you have the latest shot possible, sometimes the shells just don't want to fly true. So one tip I would say is, even if it looks like you've got a pretty clear shot, I would wait until your gun stopped aiming in, because it's always better safe than sorry. I have been tricked by some shots just really bouncing off plates that they really shouldn't have because I didn't wait long enough for it to aim in, and then I'm the person that has to pay for it because I just couldn't wait another 2 seconds or so to get that shell off. Now, there is one thing this tank does not have an amazing amount of, and that is gun depression. It's only 6 degrees. However, you're really not going to need that much gun depression when you are running a box this large. If somebody's getting to the side of you or they're tracking you, it is pretty easy to take this vehicle out. So I would highly suggest, as you'll notice in all of my loadouts when I do run these tanks, is to run 2 repair kits. Of course, run the multi-repair kit, which runs everything, the fire extinguisher, the med kit, and everything. But I would also suggest to run the second repair kit. That way, when you get tracked and somebody, thinks, well, he's repaired his track once, I can destroy one more time and flank him. When they get around that corner, they're going to be in for a nasty surprise. So that is one thing I would definitely say, make sure you do run on this tank. Now, one of the biggest downfalls, in my opinion, for this vehicle is the maneuverability and the top speed of it. It only goes 30 kilometers per hour, and while the engine power may be very good, it still does not have an excellent traverse speed, and 30 kilometers per hour really isn't going to be fast enough where when you're in the middle of driving to one side of the map and you see that they all push to the other side, you can't just decide, oh, well, I guess I'll go over there. You're not going to be able to get there fast enough. You're probably not going to get any damage out. You're going to be the last guy left against all 7 of the enemy tanks. So one thing you do really need to know is map positioning. As you can see here, this leopard tried to flank me, but I knew I had to push my tank up against a wall and wedge him into it. Always make sure you're near some sort of object. Don't sit out in the open unless you're way behind your team and you know you're completely safe. Because, as I said, being really slow can really affect you in the wrong scenarios. If that leopard had gotten behind me, I could have easily just lost 1,000 of my hit points just like that with one snap of a finger. So as I said, make sure you can easily be able to wedge people off you. As you can see, I'm always trying to stay near some sort of wall when there always is the threat of being flanked. And the other really tricky part added on with the speed of this tank, not to mention is being flanked, but also you have to decide where to push in the beginning of this map, because as you guys know, the Jagdpanzer is a very heavy tank. In fact, it has the same armor profile as an E100. Now, the upper part of it, of course, doesn't have a turret, so it's a little bit different. I'll be getting into the armor on that in a little bit. But overall, it's a very well armored tank. And as I said before, it's got the damage per minute to brawl with the heavy tanks. So you can run it like a heavy. But the question is, when do you draw the limit and you don't want to run it like a heavy, and you'll be more effective sitting at the back of the map, being a tank destroyer, because you do have very good dispersion. I think it's actually the same dispersion as an Object 268. So my opinion on it is that if there's a bunch of medium tanks on the enemy team and you know the map, let's say you're on Castilla or something, put your tank into a position near the ridge lines or something where you're able to shoot at the mediums. You don't want to push it aggressive against medium tanks because, as I said, it's just not very quick. You're going to be flanked really easily and probably taken right off the map. Even if they do have a couple heavies, it's not worth it to push all the way around there just to kill the heavies and then have your entire team die by being pushed on by the mediums, and you can't support them because you just killed 2 heavy tanks. So my opinion is that if you're up against a bunch of heavies, and it doesn't even matter what type of heavy, but let's say the enemy team has 4 heavies, 5 heavies, and you know they're going to push somewhere, then yeah, sure, you can fight them. I still wouldn't suggest to fight them one-on-one close distance, but you can sit in the mid ranges and just easily snap them and back on up slowly, and then pull back out, angle your tank, and keep doing that, and you're going to do very well in it. But again, if you're up against mediums, let's say there's 4 medium tanks on the enemy team, I would definitely suggest you want to focus more on those mediums because those are your biggest threats over the enemy heavy tank. Now, the hardest thing, in my opinion, to do in a Jagdpanzer is to know how to angle it. If you don't know how to angle the armor on this tank, you will really fail in it. Because everybody's going to pen you. You're just like a giant sitting duck, or should I say a giant tin can, sitting out in the open, just waiting for people to shoot at it. So hopefully I'm going to show you guys how I angle the tank, and maybe this will rub off against some of you guys. So you can see I'm in Armor Inspector, and currently there's a T-62A loaded heat aiming at the Jagdpanzer. And you can see there are 4 major weak spots on it. You've got this giant lower plate, which has a plate about 230-40 millimeters thick. While that may be pretty thick, just in general, sadly, up against heat ammo in Tier 10 vehicles, that's not going to even stand the closest chance when it's most effectively angled. Again, the next big weak spot you can see are the cheeks next to the gun mantlet. Now, this is a weak spot, but you can see it's around 290 and even up to 300 millimeters thick on this tank. And that means when people do have their standard ammunition aimed at the cheeks of this tank, it's going to be almost impossible to penetrate. So that is one thing to keep in mind, is that if people don't spam heat at you, you will do exceptionally well, even if you don't angle the tank's superstructure. However, I always try and do so. And the final spot, which a lot of people don't even know about, is there is this cupola. However, it is going to be pretty hard to hit it because usually when you aim at a Jagdpanzer, you'll be sitting at an angle like this, so it is pretty hard to hit that spot at the top, but it is a very weak spot, as you can see, only about 184 thick. But I would only suggest to aim at that if this Jagdpanzer is not loaded, because I usually sit out in the open for quite some time trying to accurately get my shells into that spot, even if I do have the opportunity. But as you can see, when aiming dead straight, Jagdpanzer really isn't that menacing, but you can see as soon as I slowly start to turn this tank, that upper part becomes completely red, and still the sides of the tank are completely impenetrable. So my best bet is I would say angle this tank at around a 25-30 degree angle. Now you're not going to be able to shoot people. As you can see, the gun does not traverse enough to shoot at people. However, that doesn't really matter. When you run a Jagdpanzer, you've got 800 damage. You shoot somebody for 800, and then you back up, and what you want to do is you can see the edge right where that lower plate sort of splits off into the side armor. Well, what you want to do is you want to hide that lower plate on a wall. So you can say that's a wall. I'd say you want to sort of match the wall up right with the superstructure of your tank. So that way you can hide your superstructure and you can hide the tank's tracks. And that way, when you do pull around the corner, you're going to have a lot easier time to be able to shoot the enemy tanks. You can see that upper superstructure is now around 317 thick, and the edges are 400. You're never going to be able to pen that. And this lower part here through the tracks are about 352. But as I said before, because this tank shoots heat ammo, that's 62A, the tracks aren't really that big a weak spot, because when heat ammo is fired at the tracks of a Jagdpanzer, it's never going to penetrate. So in fact, you can see here, even when it's only 272 thick, it's still impossible to penetrate with a 62A heat round, because it just can't get through that spaced armor. So in fact, a really nice thing is that you can even over angle when you do know the tanks you're going up against. If you go up against an IS-4 versus an IS-7, you can know that you can really farly extend your tank's aiming circle, and then they're going to have to load APCR ammo, and you can see with APCR they're not going to pen anything. Heat, it looks like they can pen, but they can't. So the superstructure on this tank is going to be completely impenetrable. So all you have to do is really sit around a 30, 25 degree angle in this tank, wiggle it back and forth. Don't just sit still, wiggle it back and forth, drive it forwards, backwards, make it really hard for the enemy to pen you, and you will do really well in this tank. But other than that, guys, I really hope you did enjoy this video on how to run the tank. I hope you learned a couple things. If you didn't, I hope you enjoyed the video just in general. But other than that, guys, I hope you do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and stuck to the end of this video. And other than that, leave a like if you did like it, downvote it if you didn't like it. Let me know why in the comments down below. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.